Good evening. I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Nice to be back with you. This is my weekly internet show. Missed y'all last week because of Easter, but nice to be back with you this evening. Periodically I listen to conservative talk radio. I have Sirius XM in my car, and most of the time I'm listening to music, but every once in a while, for a little bit of entertainment, I'll go over to the conservative talk radio just to see what they're talking about. It's usually nonsense, which is why I rarely listen to it. And they didn't disappoint this time. I heard them debating and discussing and arguing with as much energy and hype and passion as you could ever imagine from people arguing over one of the most inane, idiotic things I have ever heard in my entire life. I mean, I've heard a lot of idiocy from conservatives. This one, I think, just exceeds them all. The big subject of debate was which presidential candidate, Obama or Romney, assuming he gets the nomination, has the better wife. I mean, I kid you not. This is what they were arguing about. And both sides. Apparently, some Democratic lady made a comment about Romney's wife not working for a living or something like that. And then the other side weighs in about Michelle Obama, and the president talks about how his wife balanced it out, working and taking care of the children. And then this conservative talk show host was like going ape over this. And he says, okay, if they want to argue over which wife is better, let's bring it on because we're ready to fight over this issue. And I mean, like I say, and they just kept going on and on and on. I thought, well, this will just be a passing thing, like 5 minutes or so. I think the whole hour was devoted to this. I mean, I just couldn't put up with it anymore. I finally had to go back to the music. But this is the idiocy that goes on when you've got two wings of the same party, the statist party. You've got this giant welfare state, the giant warfare state, that is cracking apart before our very eyes, and they're arguing over which candidates got the better wife. I mean, this is incredible. Since this is the weekend of the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, maybe that's a metaphor that we can use. I mean, here people are on the Titanic, and it hits the iceberg, and fights break out between the Democrats and the Republicans as to which wife is going to have which wife is going to be better, or what should be the decor of the rooms on the Titanic. Which decor is better. I mean, it's just absolute idiocy. I mean, here you have a country where they may be able to pull it off with injecting inflationary funds and getting this thing revived again, but I wouldn't count on it. I mean, this thing is in really bad shape, and they seem to have temporarily stemmed the tide in Greece and in the other European countries where the welfare state has bankrupted their governments and their societies. But we all know, especially the Austrians, the libertarians, know that these are temporary fixes, and that every time they temporarily fix it with this injection of fake, irredeemable expansion of fiat money, paper money, irredeemable paper money, the next crisis around the corner is just that much worse. And so, what I'd like to do tonight is to talk a little bit about how these Democrats and Republicans see the world, and I lump them in the same category. I mean, if you've been listening to this show for any length of time, you know how I feel about these people. I mean, they are all statists. That they pretend that there's this big fight, the left-right divide in America, and they act like, oh my gosh, we're really fighting with each other. And I mean, it's ludicrous because they all share the same philosophy. They all believe in socialism. Yeah, the Republicans love to call Obama a socialist, but they believe in the same programs. Social Security, they all believe in it. When you talk about repealing Social Security to a Republican/Democrat, they go ballistic. And they all revere Franklin Roosevelt, who brought into existence the socialistic welfare state, Social Security. They all believe in Medicare and Medicaid. oh yeah, the Republicans might rail against Lyndon Johnson for this or that or whatever. The Democrats may rail against Lyndon Johnson for, bombing all those people in Vietnam. But the fact is they all believe in Medicare and Medicaid. Okay. Now, so, for example, I mean, let's talk about this as an example. Republicans are all hyped up about Obamacare, Obamacare. That's all you hear them talking about. Well, we've got to get Obama out of there so we can get rid of Obamacare. I combine the two because it really is no difference between Romney and Obama. But you see, what they don't want to talk about is the crisis, the underlying healthcare crisis that was there before Obama passed his mandate and his gigantic socialistic plan. I mean, he didn't just pass it willy-nilly. He passed it because there was a crisis, a healthcare crisis. So if you get rid of Obamacare and the mandate and so forth, where people are forced to buy, health insurance, you're still left with the crisis, the original crisis, the healthcare crisis, the medical crisis that existed, that motivated these people to pass Obamacare. And so what do Republicans say about that? They don't say anything. They just say, Obamacare, Obamacare, we got to get rid of Obamacare. Well, okay, that doesn't do any good at all, because you get rid of it and all of a sudden you're still left with the original problem. And that original problem, and this is why they won't talk about it, is rooted in Medicare and Medicaid. That's when all the healthcare problems started happening in this country. That's when healthcare costs started soaring through the roof. That's when doctors started getting disgusted with the medical profession, started retiring early. That's when the Fed started prosecuting doctors for Medicare fraud and Medicaid fraud and abuse. And so doctors are sitting there saying, oh, this ain't worth it. And you've got all these weird contraptions and vehicles and stuff in healthcare now. All of it is rooted in government involvement in healthcare. Now, on the supply side, you've got licensure laws. I mean, that restricts the supply of healthcare providers. But on the demand side, the big impetus has been Medicare and Medicaid. And yet, do you ever see these people, either on the liberal or the conservative side, talking about just pulling this weed out by its root by just repealing Medicare and Medicaid? No, because they believe in it. They're not going to get rid of something they believe in. And so what are they left with? Arguing over which candidate's got the better wife. Because you see, there's no way to fix this thing. There's no way to fix these failed socialistic programs. I mean, Social Security, there's no fund there. There never has been a fund there. It entirely depends on just taxing young people and transferring the money to older people. Now, when older people say, I put it in, Jacob, I put it in, you didn't put into anything. There's no fund there. I keep repeating that. There is no Social Security fund. You got taxed. Your tax monies went to people that are now dead. And so you can't get your money back from them. And so all you can do is say, well, they did it to me, and I'm going to do it to the young people of this country, and that's their problem. If they want to repeal it when I'm dead, that's fine. But as long as I'm alive, since those dead people did it to me, I'm going to make life as miserable as I can for the young people of this country, many of whom are still living at home because they can't afford an apartment. They're trying to start lives. They're struggling, trying to make ends meet. They can't save anything. A lot of them have these government-induced student loans. But nobody wants to admit, well, except the libertarians, that the root of the problem are these socialist programs. Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, farm subsidies, foreign aid to dictatorships, education grants. I mean, the whole welfare state paradigm. And that's on the domestic side. Over on the foreign side, you've got the warfare state paradigm. The giant empire. American government is the world's policeman, the invader, the occupier, the torturer. Whatever, bases in more than 100 countries. Oh, we've got to police the world. Oh my gosh, we've got to watch whether a missile's being fired from North Korea. Oh, let's send more troops there. Oh, now we've got the communist threat on top of the terrorist threat. And, there's always threats and crises and chaos and fear, and everybody's all hyped up all the time. And that's what the whole national security state's all about, is keeping people afraid. Oh my gosh, another crisis. Oh my gosh, North Korea is launching a missile. Oh my gosh, the communists are going to come and get us. And oh my gosh, the communists are going to get together with the terrorists. And that is the modus operandi of the national security state. Keep people afraid. So they keep funding the national security state. I mean, these guys get more money than they did during the entire Cold War. I mean, it's incredible. But it's because they're able to incite this fear among the American people. We got the biggest, strongest government in the world in history. And we've got our citizens who are the most frightened people in the world. I mean, there's nobody more frightened than the Americans. And oh my gosh, the communists are coming and the terrorists are coming and they're going to get us and they're going to conquer our country and they're going to take over the IRS and the public schools and they're going to raise the tolls on the interstate highway system. It's just ludicrous. But that's their paradigm, you see. That's the paradigm of the liberals and the conservatives. The welfare state domestically, the warfare state in foreign affairs. And so what they're relegated to is, trying to come up with some kind of reform that makes it work. But the last thing they're going to do is to admit that their paradigms are the root of the woes that afflict our nation. Socialism doesn't work anywhere, including here in the United States. But they think, these statuses, that if they can teach children that it's not really socialism, that, like public schooling isn't really socialism, well, except in Cuba, because it happens to be one of the Fidel Castro's pride and joys, public schooling, or government-provided health care is not socialism as long as it's in America, but it is in Cuba, where Fidel Castro considers it one of his pride and joys. I mean, they honestly think that by teaching children that these programs are freedom and free enterprise, and this whole philosophy of the U.S. government is the world's international policeman and military empire, navies, troops everywhere, and so forth, and the drug war, where you got American troops over there enforcing those laws in Latin America and to a certain extent here. I mean, you got this giant, cancer, really, the welfare part of the government, the warfare part of the government, and they think, well, if we just teach people that this is freedom and free enterprise, that'll solve the problem. Well, it doesn't solve anything. It's just a denial of reality. But their hope is things start to crack apart here, you see, because you got to fund this junk. And the only way government gets its money is through taxation. And what happens when they all of a sudden, business starting collapsing is with the burden of this huge welfare warfare state. Well, there's not enough tax revenues to fund all of their operations. And they get angry over this, and they say, how can we get more people back to work? They never think in terms of just eliminating the programs. I mean, remember the debt ceiling? You remember just a few months ago, they said, oh, well, please, we have to raise the debt ceiling. Well, what does all that mean? Well, it means that they have been borrowing to fund their operations. Now, sure, the income tax funds part of it, but they are spending more than what the taxes are bringing in. They have for decades. I mean, that was how they got their wars in Iraq and Afghanistan funded, and their imperial expenses. A large part they went to the Chinese communists, if you can believe that, to lend them the money. And so they keep going into debt. Well, that debt falls on you. It falls on your children, your grandchildren. I mean, I don't know what it's up to now, but I think it's like $50,000 a person. And people just kept saying, well, oh, I won't have to pay it. No, they'll never come after me for it. They can just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and it's not a problem. Well, as Greece learned, there is a problem. I mean, you reach a certain point where, oh my gosh, then they start looking everywhere for taxes. They never think in terms of just abolishing the programs. I mean, look, they could abolish the drug war. I mean, what greater example of failure than that? But because so many of them are on the take, you got judges on the take, you got prosecutors on the take, you got cops on the take, and they got the asset forfeiture laws that, where they just go out and steal people's assets, especially poor people that can't hire lawyers. And then you got the bigots, I mean, what greater way to attract bigots to the government than to have a drug war? I mean, a bigot, he said, this is great. I can go out there and harangue blacks to my heart's content. And it's all legal. All I got to do is become a drug cop or a DEA cop, and I can harangue blacks and Hispanics in the inner city, and there's not a darn thing they can do about it because I'm enforcing the law. Well, that's what the drug war is all about. It's about money, corruption, because they can't say it's successful. All they can do at best is say, well, we have good intentions. We have good intentions. We don't care about your good intentions. We see how you have hurt people. You've destroyed people. Look at Latin America, where they've killed, what, 50,000 people in the last 6 years alone? I mean, don't you love it that they used to say, well, if only they would crack down on the war on drugs. That's the problem. They haven't really cracked down. So in Mexico, they cracked down. I mean, they used the military. I mean, people were even complaining about civil liberties violations from the troops in the cities along the border and everything. And 50,000 people dead? I mean, that's incredible. But, you know, the drug warriors just say, well, you know, that's history. Let's move on. Let's keep going on. Well, they don't want to talk about abolishing the programs. Let me read you what I read in the Washington Post today. This is your classic statist solution to the welfare warfare state. The Post is talking about the Buffett rule, you know, where they're going to tax the rich with some alternative minimum tax. And that's all the whole thing. Let's tax the rich. Let's tax the rich. Well, as the Post points out, that even if you adopt this Buffett rule, it's a drop in the bucket. It's like it's not going to accomplish anything. And it says, no solution to the real and much larger problem of generating revenue to fund the government and begin to deal with the burgeoning debt. In other words, we've got to come up with the revenue, you know, get people back to work again. We got to generate new taxpayers. And then happy days are here again. They've got all their welfare programs, all their warfare programs, taxpayers slaving away, sending, what, a third of their income to the government. And the welfare statists get to stay in power. The warfare statists get their ships and their tanks and their new weaponry and their new airplanes and so forth. You see, they don't talk in terms of abolishing programs. And so that debt ceiling debate, you know, what the deal was is that, you know, a debt ceiling is a ceiling. It's saying this is not a good situation. And so when you reach this ceiling, that's it. You can't borrow any more money. And they all knew it. Heading up in the 2 or 3 years prior to that debt ceiling reach, they all knew that the ceiling was going to be reached. Do you think they abolished anything? Do you think they slashed spending? No, because they knew they would just laugh when they got to the debt ceiling, because they do this every time. They start saying, oh my gosh, the world's falling in if we don't raise the debt ceiling. Oh, please, just one time. This is irresponsible if we don't raise the debt ceiling. But next time, we'll reform. We'll reform. We'll make sure we don't reach the debt ceiling the next time. Have you seen them slash any expenses since the time the debt ceiling was raised? I mean, you would think they would say, well, gosh, you know, it was really lucky that we got by that time. They're laughing. They're laughing because they know when the debt ceiling is reached again within the next year or so, they're going to just do the same thing. Oh, it's irresponsible. And, of course, we're going to turn around as libertarians and say, why didn't you slash the spending since the last time? We told you that now's the time to slash spending. Nah, they're just laughing because they know that each time they're going to do this, and ultimately, the chickens are going to come home to roost. I mean, they may already be. You know, libertarians have been arguing that this thing can't go on forever. We've been saying that for many, many years. And each time they inject this artificial stimulus into the economy, inflated money, and they get by with it. They inflate new bubbles. But one of these days, the day of reckoning is going to come unless something happens. And there's no sign of that anything's going to be slashed, abolished, repealed. The welfare state is here. And the warfare state is here. And the day of reckoning is going to happen at some point, just like it happened in Greece. And so, there's your difference between the statists, liberals and conservatives, who believe in the welfare state. They believe in the warfare state. And they may exclaim against, oh, out of control spending. Oh, I'm a Republican. I oppose out of control spending. But he favors all the programs on which the spending is done. So it's ridiculous. You know, it's like saying, well, I love rain, but I just hate thunder. I'm opposed to thunder, but I'm all in favor of rain, you know. It's ridiculous. I meant lightning and thunder. You know, I favor lightning, but I'm against thunder. Oh yeah, but yeah, ridiculous, right? But that's what their paradigm is. You know, on a domestic side, let me give you a difference between libertarians and statists. The statists are the liberals and the conservatives. On the domestic side, well, it's sort of domestic international economic issues. That Obama's right now on his way to Colombia for a big Latin America summit, and he was quoted in the paper as seeing that his job is president. He sees his job as president partly is to go abroad and open up markets for American businesses. Well, that's the role of government in a free society, to open up markets for businesses. You know, I mean, this is what libertarians question, that these people never ask, what is the legitimate role of government in a free society? And is it to open up markets? I mean, what does that mean? To invade countries to open up markets, forcing them to buy from Americans? I mean, suppose they've got, you know, a protectionist country. Well, presumably he means, well, we're going to negotiate. In other words, the U.S. government's going to drop its tariffs if they drop their tariffs. But wait a minute. Tariffs are a violation of our freedom, the freedom of the American people. Freedom entails the right to buy whatever you want from anybody you want. And so the U.S. government has all these tariffs and protectionist devices, and their idea of opening up markets is to go down there and negotiate a dropping of U.S. tariffs versus foreign tariffs. I mean, this is ludicrous. It's Obama saying, you know, this shows you I'm a job creator in chief. I'm a job creator in chief. Well, you got Romney over there and the rest of the ilk, except Ron Paul. Ron doesn't talk like that, but, you know, elect me because I'm a businessman. I know how to create jobs. I'm a job creator in chief. Well, it's not the role of government to create jobs. That's not the role. I mean, see, the statists see that the role of government is to manage the economy, centrally manage the economy. Okay? I mean, you got the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and the State Department and the Department of Economic Advisors, Council of Economic Advisors, and they're planning the economy. Well, that's a socialist notion. You know, a centrally planned economy is a socialist notion. We libertarians say that's not the role of government. That if you have government planning an economy, you're in trouble. You're going to be in bad trouble, which is one of the reasons America is in bad trouble. Look, if you want free trade, if you really believe in free trade, you don't need to negotiate anything. You don't need to go abroad and sit down with their advisors and their president and say, hey, let's work out a deal. We'll drop our tariffs if you drop your... All you have to do is unilaterally abolish tariffs, import restrictions, trade restrictions, just abolish them all. For Americans. In other words, all the U.S. government has to do is liberate the American people. Liberate them to spend their money wherever they want, buy whatever they want, including the 50-something year embargo on Cuba, which is really an attack not just on the Cuban people, which of course it is, but on the American people too, because it puts Americans into jail for going to Cuba and spending their money there. And so that's really the secret to trade. Now, does that guarantee that other countries are going to drop restrictionist barriers on their citizenry? No. But I mean, the most you can do, the least you can do, is just liberate the American people to buy and sell and whatever, and then let other governments work out whatever they want to do. You don't need the American government to go over there and bludgeon anybody. So, for example, the U.S. government could lift its embargo on Cuba. Theoretically, Castro could immediately say, we make it illegal for Americans to come over here and spend money. Okay. Well, if that happens, that happens. That's something bad for the Cuban people. But the point is that you can't fight this kind of thing by adopting the same kind of measures, because it turns you into the very country you're supposedly fighting. I mean, that was one of the problems with U.S. policy toward Cuba. The U.S. government ends up adopting many of the practices of the communists and the socialists in order to supposedly fight communism and socialism. I mean, you know, assassination, terrorist acts in Cuba, invasions, regime change operations, embargoes. I mean, that's not what America's all about. And so, and, this Latin American conference is interesting for another reason. That the Latin American countries, you can Google this, and put Latin America and drug legalization or war on drugs or drug war, and it's incredible. A lot of these Latin American countries are talking about legalizing drugs, ending the drug war. I mean, the U.S. officials are hopping mad and over even the discussion of this thing. I mean, this is the last thing they want to happen. I mean, they thrive off this drug war. Lots of power, lots of money. But the people that are paying the biggest price are the people in Latin America. I mean, that's where the gang wars are taking place, the assassination of government people, of journalists. I mean, they've turned Latin America into really just a death wasteland. And so, a lot of them are figuring it out. They're figuring out what we libertarians have been saying for decades, and what a lot of liberals and some conservatives have been saying, that the only way to do this is to end prohibition. Okay, just like prohibition of alcohol. I mean, we had the Al Capone and the gang wars and the police corruption, the payoffs, the bribes, and so forth. Do the same thing with drugs. It's failed. Just give it up. Yes, they have to give up their corruption and their bribes and their takes and their asset forfeitures and their bigotry exercise of the drug war. So what? At least the rest of society benefits. We get rid of this thing. Well, the Latin Americans are figuring this out. And so they're going to this conference and they're talking ending the drug war. It's very, very exciting. I mean, I don't know if anything will come of it because the U.S. is hopping mad. They're going to be firmly opposed to this. They're going to be, no doubt, threatening to cut off foreign aid to these countries and so forth. That's what the purpose of foreign aid is for, is to get those countries in line. In fact, speaking of foreign aid, don't you just love the hypocrisy of liberals? They promise food aid to North Korea. Okay, North Korea is your classic socialist country. Okay, they got government-provided health care for everyone, government-provided schooling for everyone, public schooling. The government takes care of everyone. I mean, it's a liberal dream. The government takes care of everyone. Everybody works for the state. Everybody's guaranteed a job. There's total equality in North Korea. Okay, everybody is equal. Okay, but they're starving. Okay, everybody's nothing. Everybody has nothing. So they're the classic example is when the government's managing everything. I mean, nobody has anything. And that's the direction that America's headed in. Now, granted, we have a lot more private enterprise still and a lot of private businesses and private ownership of wealth. But what I'm saying is that we're moving in that direction of more and more government control over the economy. Well, in North Korea, they have it all. And so Obama says, well, I'm a good person because I'm a liberal and I love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged. And that's why I love the welfare state, because I'm a good liberal and I'm going to give food aid to the North Koreans. But then the North Koreans fire this missile that fizzled. And what does Obama do? He says, I'm canceling the food aid. But wait a minute, Mr. Obama. The food aid was for the poor, wasn't it? Wasn't it to help the people? It wasn't supposed to be a foreign policy tool, was it? Oh, heaven forbid, Mr. Obama, that you would use food as a weapon. I mean, North Korean people are starving to death. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is moral or proper, that the government ought to be feeding people, but I'm just trying to expose the hypocrisy of liberals. They go over there and say, we love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged, and so because they fired a missile, we're going to cancel the food aid. Or you can see it on the immigration side. The hypocrisy. We love the poor, needy, and disadvantaged as they raid families and businesses and deport people and separate families. And I mean, there's hypocrisy on both sides of the statist party, the liberal wing and the conservative wing. I mean, it's only the libertarians, that we talk in terms of moral principles, that people have a right to live their lives the way they want, to accumulate wealth, decide for themselves what to do with it, handle their own retirement, handle their own charitable decisions, interact and trade with foreigners as much as they want, buy and sell, travel to Cuba or wherever, dismantle the empire, dismantle the welfare state. I mean, that's why we libertarians are different. We come from an entirely different paradigm. I mean, we're not a subset of liberalism. We're not a subset of conservatism. They've got the statists at one side. That's the liberals and the conservatives. And you got the libertarians over here. And it's exciting because people are starting to figure that out. but we can't fall into their trap of coming up with libertarian solutions to reform the welfare state or reform the warfare state. We've got to stick with our philosophy. We've got to stick with our principles. And now more than ever, because whoever wins this election looks like it's going to be a statist. And so and yet you can tell the world is excited about libertarianism. You can see that in the Ron Paul campaign. We have to continue pushing forward with libertarian ideas and libertarian philosophy. That's the show for tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you guys next week.